Here's Charlie Dickens, Chapter 8, titled Bob's Tales. Bob knew that he had a captive audience, and it didn't take him long to begin his tall tales. He didn't know about Tinker's terrible news, but he soon would. I'm sure you're wondering how I came to end up here, he asked them quite loudly. They weren't, but they both nodded in unison. I was a runaway, he said, after taking a sip of his very black coffee. I couldn't take any more of my dad's belt, he said. And then one day I grabbed it and turned around and hit him with it for a change. He didn't like it, and when he went looking for something bigger to hit me with, I scarpered, he said with a proud grin. I was 16 and all alone in the big bad world. Was I scared, I hear you ask, although they didn't? Of course I was scared, but I was determined to survive. I ate from bins and I slept in shop doorways or sheds with broken doors. He said. Charlie was intrigued. What can you eat from bins? He asked in wonder. You'd be surprised, said Bob, scratching his bristly chin. Fish and chips was a favourite, burgers, crisps, biscuits, old vegetables. But weren't they soft and smelly, said Tinker, who was feeling slightly queasy at the thought. That's when it's at its best, said Bob with a straight face. There's no better feeling than getting things for nothing, said Bob with great pride. But isn't that stealing? Said Tinker, shocked. Bob was slightly taken aback by this question, and he paused to answer, and he let the ticking of the grandfather clock fill in the silence. No, he said, it's only stealing when people don't want to throw it away. When it's in the bins, it's fair game and for all, he said. Tinker and Charlie didn't think that there'd be a queue of people hanging round the bins like in a supermarket sale, but they decided not to say anything. Couldn't you just get a job to buy things with, said Tinker, who always spoke his mind. A job, said Bob, looking slightly annoyed and momentarily unsteady on his feet. I'm too busy to get a job, he said. Tinker and Charlie thought this hard to believe, as he never looked busy. In fact, he looked as lazy as a sloth asleep in a tree. Bob could tell by their faces they didn't believe him, so he decided to give them more ammo. My job is ducking and diving to survive, he said. I never steal. I may borrow sometimes, but I always give stuff back. For a long time I lived out of them bins, he said wistfully, and then a very bad winter came and I knew that I had to find myself a home, which can be quite difficult when you haven't got two pennies to rub together. I left London, said Bob, by jumping on a train, and I found myself here in the country. There were less bins, but there were farms and orchards and apples, trees galore, he said, smiling. It was paradise to me, he added, and here I stay. Anyone want a biscuit, he said, rummaging in his two full cupboards. How do you buy all these tins and biscuits without money, said Tinker, nosily and suspiciously. I bet, said Bob. Bet, said Tinker. What do you bet on? Horses, said Bob. What's horse? Said Tinker, screwing up his face. No, horses, said Bob, laughing. Horses. I love me horses, and that's how I make me money. I bet on them, he said, smiling with pride. Now they had both heard of horses and betting, but they had no idea how to win money at it. How do you know if you are going to win? Said Tinker curiously. I study, said Bob. Study, said Charlie, like at a school. He was confused. He knew that Bob was too old to go to school. Bob grinned. He was amused. I study me books, he said, and he pointed to all of the books on his wonky bookshelf. They're not stories, he said. They show form. Form, what's that? Said Tinker, showing interest. Tells you how a horse has performed over the seasons, he added, as he picked up a leaflet and flicked through it. Charlie looked at him and he could see his face change, and the wrinkles and the scowls disappeared. A twinkle returned to his eye and a peachy rush of colour returned to his cheeks. He was like a little boy again. Bob told them how he studied the books morning, noon, and night, and of how he had learnt to spot a winner. There was a pattern in it. As soon as he won the first bet, he squirreled the money away, and then he put the money on the next horse. That won. Bob was careful and meticulous, and he began to be an expert at predicting results. It changed his life.